Okay, so let's start it. Okay, this meeting I like to today we talk about Confucius and the world that he created. Okay, so this meeting actually is original started from the philosophy and the gambler, and then we have been running for many months. And then of course we have people sign up in different places. And then you are welcome to sign up for any place, but so that's started last week. 2 weeks ago, we talked about Neo-Confucianism and Taoism, and then last week, 23rd, we talked about Mencius, and then last week we talked about Islamic philosophy. And this week we go back to Confucius and the world that he created. We are going to talk about Confucius from the outside view, not just read the text. There's 2 papers we posted. I hope everybody read it. And then next week we are going to talk about the back to the Taoism, which is Zhuangzi, the famous story about the cooking and the butcher cooking is famous, and I already posted. And I will add the sign up page here. So please sign up, and I'm going to put a chat here. Okay, so that's for next week, sign up. Okay, so welcome to sign up. And then for the next week, just 1 minute, a lot of people sign up. Okay, a lot of people check in now. So after November 13th, we talk about Zhuangzi, and later we're going to talk about another Indian ascetic theory, Rosa and Dr. Hey, what's her name? It's coming.
It's me, Karen.
Oh, yeah. Karen,
Yeah.
you want to say something about it? Yeah, sorry. Karen, you want to say something about it?
No, well, just that I encourage people to attend. This is a subject that's new to me, and I'm going to be learning as much as I can about it in the next couple of weeks. But I have a background in aesthetic theory, and it deals with a lot of interesting questions about why we respond to artworks in the way we do, what we get out of our interaction with artworks, like why, what it is we appreciate, what the aesthetic emotions are about, what our relationship is to the content of artworks, addresses some of the questions about art that are very top prominent in contemporary aesthetic theory, like, why we enjoy tragedy and horror and things like that. So it should be a fun introduction to an interesting and ancient topic in Indian aesthetic theory.
Yeah, great, thank you. And then I also will put in the sign up, and then hope you sign up. I already posted, and this subject, a special subject, I have no way to deal with, so we rely on Karen to talk about this. And then Thanksgiving week, we are going to take 1 day off on the Thanksgiving week. And December 4th, we have another Indian. We are going to talk about Upanishad and Kasa Upanishad. And BK, are you here? You can talk about this if you want. That's the and then we bring to the end of this year. That's December 11th. So I'm going to host a general review. So you have been here. A lot of people have been here many times, and you can come join and ask any question, discuss what we already talked about, and give us some suggestion for the next year. So let's start. Okay, talk about the Confucius and then his life. Okay, and let's start from. Okay, so anybody want to say something when you read this paper, and any suggestion or any question you want to know? Just like Mark, like to know what's the Confucianism related to today's China, and we will put this one. I think the paper already talked about this. Yeah. James,
Jason, my opinion is that the first paper asks a question, why it points out that Mao Zedong had an anti-Confucius campaign. The second paper states that the Chinese government and Xi Jinping are completely opportunist and using Confucius as to try to buttress their state. So these are kind of like opposite concepts. In other words, we have the war against Confucianism by Mao Zedong, and then Xi Jinping being a complete supporter of Confucius ideas. But I think this contradiction is really saying something about the difference between Mao Zedong and Xi Jinping as leaders of the Communist Party of China. So I think that's basically what it defines, is kind of like a difference in opinion and a revival. Sometimes we have revivals. In other words, people condemn the leaders of the Civil War that were on the Confederate side now, but before they were accepted, people in the South would commemorate the births and deaths of the Confederate leaders, and movies were made about memorializing the Civil War from the standpoint of the South. So this was kind of like societies change, and society in China has changed, and Confucius is now very popular with the leadership of the Communist Party, where it was before a kind of a campaign. There was a campaign against it in the 1970s, which is what the first article talks about.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And then we will talk about more about this. Yeah, thank you. And Joe?
Yeah, I would just actually like to, just build on that very briefly, is this idea of sustainability within this context, because the campaign against Confucianism was, for initial power grab, but there seems to be a return to Confucianism because it looks to be a more sustainable way of actually maintaining the culture and creating an environment where people are willing to help one another. So it kind of counters the rugged individualism that it was once scapegoated for, maybe, as one article had pointed out, that it was associated with the essentially countering individualism, and was the result of why they didn't necessarily progress in certain areas. But now it's seen as a way of sustaining the progress that has been made in China up to this date. So I just want to talk about it maybe from a sustainability factor, like as to why China looks at this as being a sustainable model going forward and didn't initially.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so we have James want to talk about the contradiction of this, and Joe want to talk about sustainability on this one. It's Joe, please.
Yeah, I just like to point out, I don't really think Confucius has a lot to do with this at all. This is just what the modern politicians are doing. You see this a lot in Christianity. And Islam, people just adopt it when they need it, but I don't really think they always pay attention to what's being said.
Great, Joe. Okay, so we make sure we cover on this one, and okay, that's
No.
Okay, so let's start. Before we read talk about this paper, I just organized, not everybody familiar with Confucius. Okay, so I just organized, his lifestyle, so to get the idea for what Confucius as a person. Okay, and I use his age. I think that will be more meaningful. Okay, so roughly he was born on 551 BC. Okay, 100 years before Socrates, I think. 20 years after Buddha, I think, I'm not sure. Okay, so there's only one sentence, so-called the thumbnail biography, okay, from Confucius analog, okay, I list here, I'm going to put in his life. So he was born, okay, and he his father, the first marriage has like 7 or so many daughters, and then he has a second marriage, and I think have a son, and then I think he's handicapped or crippled or something, and then his father decided to marry another 18 years old girl, and then have a Confucius. So Confucius is number 2 in the family. So when his father have him, I think it's around 72 years old, and his mother is quite young. So at 3 years old, his father died. And 15 years, that's according to his writing, his teacher. He said when he was 15 and he made his mind to study. Okay, that's important. Okay, 15 years old. And so he's not like early study, early education. Okay, so he made his mind to study at 15. And his mother died at 17. And his son, he only had one son, so-called Li, that's his name, was born and when Confucius is 19 years old. And we don't know much about him, but according to his own teacher, he said at 30, okay, he became independent. So I'm not very sure what the meaning of this, but we can assume he probably start his own business, and then he probably start to teaching something, and then a lot of things we don't know. Okay, that's his saying. And about 35 years old, according to the historical account, he was in the low-ranking aristocrat, okay, in Lu, the state of Lu, but they had some turmoil in his home country, so he escaped to the neighboring country, Qi, and become a private consultant. Okay, not a real job. And when he is 40, and then according to his writing, he never got confused. So that probably means he knows many things. He got established in his academic study. And also, according to his writing, when he was 15, he said, according to his word, he knows the divine mandate. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Probably he knows his future, what he's going to do. So you can know, he's a late boomer. Okay, it's not very early. And he also said, if you are interested in the book of change, or so-called I Ching, okay, so he said, after 50, you can study that. So he probably put a lot of commentary on I Ching, okay, after that time. And then he got a real job, okay, at 51, when he go back to the state of Lu, okay, he got a job, probably sometime like chief police officer or for the security of the state. I think that's his job, and that's his real job. Okay, probably the first time got the official job. And 5 years later, he was fired. Okay, and then he started traveling around China for 14 years, and a lot of followers with him. And according to his writing, he said when he was 60, he has so-called ear. The writing used a very funny word, the ear, smooth ear, this kind of thing. A lot of interpretation, but I think he doesn't mean he can. Most of the interpretation will say at the 60. He can, every word from him, he can understand, and he will not angry on the word. But I don't see that's the reason. I think the reason, the word ear probably a mistake. Okay, so probably he meant he's retired. Okay, and it's matched with his career, because around that time he got fired. He probably tried to regain his job, but he failed. So he decided to retire from the government. So I think that's the reason, but that's just my opinion. But most of people will talk about because he can become a very good attitude for everything, every word talk to him. He feel his ear is very smooth. He can hear anything. Okay. And since he tried, I think his major achievement is during this period of time. He traveled with a lot of his disciples or followers around the world, and I think they try to sell his idea. Okay. And then for 14 years, I think he probably not be successful. So he go back to his hometown. And at the age of 69, his son died. And the same year, his grandson, Zhi was born. Okay, so Zhi also important because he is one of the writer of the so-called Great Learning. And I will find a chance to introduce this short writing. And also important is Zhi is also the father, the teacher of Mencius, according to the historical account. So they have some connection here. When he was 70, and does he have right again? He said he can do whatever he wants and never violate the rule or the so-called rituals. So that means he already in the situation, he can do whatever he want to do and never doing wrong. Okay, so that's what he's talking about. And 71 years old, his favorite student, so-called Yan Hui, okay, he died. So he's quite sad, and the old age, his son and the favorite student died, and the age of 72, he died. Okay, so that's the brief, okay, history, his biography I put together. So any comment on this one? On his life question? Okay, I think that's no question. Okay, so because nobody know, okay, what's going on. So Joe, please.
I just wanted to ask, was like 72, is that old at that time? I mean, it seems like an old age in most of civilization. Was 72 old?
I think so, same as Socrates, right? Socrates died at 72. So I think my idea is you want to be a great philosopher, you got to live old, so, so. And 72 is not easy though during that time, and probably run into his gene because his father, at 72 years old, lived to 75, and the 72 still can have a kid. So means they probably quite strong. And
just let me add, because he's also seems to be active. It's not like he's 72 and he's not doing anything. He's still active.
Yeah, that's right. That's I agree. So in this point, it's an admirable person, and according to historical account, he probably over 6 feet tall. Okay, but we don't know. In today's case, it's very tall, but the ancient Chinese, that's huge. Okay, so we don't know, but that's according to the historical account. He's very tall, but for sure, he probably very active, very healthy, and to the old age. Yeah, that's for sure, because he can, most of people, even today, after 50, then kind of feel like, not much to do, but he's still at the 56, lost his job and still willing to spend 14 years travel around China. Okay, there's no air flight, no advanced modern transportation, and doing this. And he really faced a lot of danger. Another time he almost lost his life. So it's admirable at this point of view, even if you disagree on his philosophy, but his lifestyle, his attitude of life, that's the part I really admire him. So,
thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for this question. Yeah. So, okay, a little bit more background, okay, on this, because we constantly talk about the Mencius in the warring state, and before warring state, we call the spring and the autumn. And here I'm going to explain why spring and the autumn. Okay, all this one is related to the first paper. Okay, the first paper from Professor Yu Tao. Okay, so I just give the background. So when you review the paper, you know the background. Okay, first, I think at the very beginning, the author talk about Confucius is a transmitter. Okay, and not a maker. Okay, so he famously said he is a transmitter, not a maker. That means he didn't write a book. Okay, he only believe in and love the ancient. Okay, he always talk about past 500 years ago, the Sage King. Okay, I venture to compare myself with our old pen. Here I want to mention the old pen, according to my family book. Okay, old pen is so-called Peng Zhu, is my ancestor. So according to the historical account, Peng Zhu, okay, if you check on the Wikipedia, he lived for 820 years old. So it's kind of like Old Testament kind of people. So lived for 820 years, and according to historical account, he is a great guy. Okay, and then, well, he must be a great guy for live for 820 years old. And Confucius said, very humbly said, that he's not an author. He just transmit what the old sage teaching. And if you want to something achievement, I just want to compare myself. I just want to be as good as the legendary old pen. Okay, 彭祖, that's what he's talking about. Okay, so that's the thing. And then about the spring and autumn, okay, we don't know. That's a book, okay, about the history book, about the history book for the state of Lu, which is Confucius' home country. But we don't know who is the real author of this one. Okay, nobody's sure. But according to Mencius, Confucius write this one. That's what Mencius said. That's why Mencius said, let me read this one. Mencius said, he said, again, the world fell into decay and the principle faded away. Perverse speaking and oppressive deed prevail again. There were instances of ministers who murdered their lords and the sons who murdered his fathers. So Confucius is in the time, he start to see the tradition value has been changed. Okay, a lot of the lord killed, a lot of the minister kill his lord and to take position as a ruler, and a lot of family, murdering situation happened. I think he meant the royal family. So Confucius, okay, is worried about this one. So Confucius was shocked by this situation and made the book called Spring and Autumn. Okay, so here Spring and Autumn probably is a history book, and then Confucius is very brief. When he writes the history book, he doesn't go by day or month by month, or even not season by season. So every year he only put spring, what's going on, and autumn, what's going on, and the next year, spring, what's going on, autumn, what's going on. It's very brief history. But the purpose of Confucius writing this book or comment on this, write commentary on this book is because he wants to express his teaching, his philosophy. That's why this book is not very fair description, I would say totally biased, but the purpose is not to reflect the real historical account, is to promote his teaching, his philosophy. So that's why Mencius continue to talk about. On this account, Confucius said, it is the spring and autumn which will make men know me, and it is the spring and the autumn which will make men condemn me. So that's important writing for Confucius, or commentary on Confucius. And because this reason, we call the period of time before warring state, we call the spring and the autumn. So any question on this? Okay, so let's move on.
I was just wondering if the seasons were identified in 551 when Confucius was born. I was just a translation that they've put in the season, spring and autumn.
Yeah, okay. Madeline, please.
Okay. Yes, I was just wondering, I remembered from a previous session that you had said that autumn is a time of death. So I assume that spring is a time of birth. Was he also being very cosmic about things, or was this just a sort of return to the past commentary?
I'm not sure how to answer this question. I think we probably talk about different things. At least I think when Confucius write this one, he just, I didn't read the whole book, but I can get a flip on this book. He writes like the 6th year of the king, Duke I of Lu, okay, spring, okay, and which state conquered the other state. Then he has a commentary on that. So that's his writing on this. So spring, autumn, what that mean? If I have to explain, I would say that's reflect the roughly time of that year. Okay, and so, but at that time, a lot of things is very different than today. So I have no way to say what he writes spring. And I don't know. Yeah.
Jason, if I may,
Yeah, please.
I think that spring and autumn can be interpreted very simply
Yeah.
as
Okay.
the historical records of the time of the Principality of Lu between 722 BCE to the end of that period, precisely 453 BC. And I think that is it's a poetical way to say historical annals.
Yeah,
And it was the
Yeah.
and it was the historical annals of the Principality of Lu where he was born.
Yeah, I think that's I believe. And then the point I want to say is he is not writing unbiased. He's very biased, okay, in this way, biased in a good way, okay, because he want to tell the people, okay, that's the right thing to do. That's not the right thing to do, okay. So it's not a real, in today's sense, historical book.
Yeah, well, it
Go
was
ahead.
an excuse for him to use the words to transmit some of his philosophy.
Yes.
Yes. So can I say something? Sorry, can I?
Yeah, sure, please.
I just wonder whether spring and autumn may have been metaphors for the times of transition. And so he's talking about the dynamics of the time in change, which is going through a period of change between the main seasons that we probably see the summer and the winter come as the main seasons, and the spring and autumn are periods of change, social change in this case.
I don't think so, but I feel I'm not an expert on this, and it could be a way, but I'm not sure. But he for sure, I read not completely read. I flipped the book or something. It talk about this year spring, something going on. This year autumn, something going on, and is there any special meaning? I don't know, and probably have some academic, some scholar may have a different research. Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, if I may again, it will take 10 seconds.
Yeah.
The basic spring, the basic spring and autumns is a historical annals from the Principality of Lu. So he did not create that. He took that.
Oh, okay.
But
Okay.
From that basis, because the spring and autumn annals is the historical record of the Principality of Lu between 722 BCE to 481 BCE. Okay, so he took it and he edited it, he transformed it into a philosophical book, but taking as the basis historical events that have been recorded by the officials of the Principality of Lu who lived before him. But he took it as an excuse to elaborate on his philosophical thinking.
Thank you, Quen. You know, I think that you explained very well, and I believe that most likely that's the case. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those who are interested in his philosophical speculation about change, he wrote a philosophical treatise called The 10 Wings, who is appended to the I Ching. Okay. Yeah. And that is more his philosophical thinking about change, the universe, the cosmos, and etc.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, we talked about I Ching about a few months ago, and I think we have you and I probably have the same belief. Most of the Confucius philosophy or thinking probably not in the analog, probably in the I Ching's commentary, because he has a lot of things to talk about this. Yeah. Okay, so
Absolutely,
that's,
because the I Ching. Oh, sorry,
yeah. I think we
stop
agree.
here.
On this. Yeah, we
you
agree
have
on
the
this.
floor.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Let's move on. Okay, here a few slides I already showed 2 weeks ago, so I'm not have the intention to go very detailed. And if you have a question, we just quick review, make sure everybody in the same page. Remember that after Confucius, then I think yeah, we talk about the 10th century. Okay, the Ming dynasty, Song dynasty. That's 1,000 years later. So 1,500 years later. Okay, there's so-called the Neo-Confucianism. Okay, so happened in the Song dynasty, and even later Ming dynasty. So we call it the Neo-Confucianism. Okay, in Chinese sometimes called Li Xue. Okay, Song Ming Li Xue. So means school of principle. And in the Ming dynasty, which is about 15th century, and Wang Yangmin talk about so-called Xinxue, the mind, study of mind. Okay, so this one all considered as Neo-Confucianism. And I just put this one. I know people have a lot of interest. I will do it later. Okay, that's represent the Neo-Confucianism, but we should not discuss this one. I just remind everybody this one, this picture, and we will talk about this one later. And the brief history, Confucius, just give you the time frame. Okay, 500 BC. Okay, that's the Confucius time. And about the 1,500 years later, that's the Song dynasty. And 2,000 years later, that's the Ming dynasty. So they have the Neo-Confucianism. And today we talk about a little bit even newer on this time. Okay, so we call it the New Confucianism. Confucianism. Okay, I'm not sure that's a proper name or not, but that's a lot of website, a lot of English scholar use the New Confucianism. Okay, which is different. Even in English, the meaning is the same. New is near, but we use this one to separate. In the Song Ming, in about 15th century, we call it the Neo-Confucianism. And in the early 20th century or late 19th century, we call it the New Confucianism, which is represent in the Qing dynasty. And these people are different than before because they already know the Western, the European civilization. And the Western the imperialism already invaded China. They start to realize the Chinese Confucianism has some problem, and they try to reinterpret. Okay, what's the meaning of Confucius? And all these people, okay, they are very well educated Confucianism, and because remember Chinese have the civil test system. So all the people have to study, okay, Confucianism, and all these people are pass the test, so they are expert on Confucius, but different than other people in their father's generation, because they know what's going on in the Europe, and they know European are not barbarian. They are much advanced than Chinese. So they start to reflect what's going on. So I quickly introduce, I think in the paper also talk about the people, Kang You-wei. Okay, he is the so-called 100 days reform. He tried to reform the Qing dynasty, but he failed and escaped to Japan. And we will talk about his life later. If you are interested, you can check the Wikipedia. He's because after the Dr. Sun Yat-sen established the Republic of China, he's still against the Republic of China. He still thinks the monarchy probably the right way to go. And his student, so-called Liang Qichao, okay, also another famous, they all try to reinterpret what's the meaning of Confucianism. So he tried to, so that's the thing I like to briefly talk about this, and then in the paper, in the article, we'll talk about Kang You-wei. Okay, so you have an idea who is the person. Okay. And another two persons I'd like to introduce that's also mentioned in today's reading. Okay, these two persons are all Jiang Dui students. So think about the situation, you know, after the early, before these two people, okay, they grow in China, okay, they have a full Confucianism teaching. She had a qualified, overqualified Confucian scholar, and they know what's going on in Europe. Like Liang Qichao, he's younger. He also know English. Okay, so he learned. Okay, so he do a lot of translation. So after that, okay, the person I want to introduce is Hu Si and P.C. Chen. Okay, these two persons are different. They grow up in China. They get early education of the Confucianism or traditional Chinese teaching. But in their around 20s, they went to America, just like today's foreign student. They come to America, and I think they went to University of Chicago. Okay, so they become the student of Jiang Dui. So both of them are become famous. Both of them got a doctorate degree. Okay, so you know, Jiang Dui is American pragmatism, or sometimes we call the instrumentalism. Okay, so they learn from him, and with their strong, okay, Confucius learning. So, and then they learn from the great guy, Jiang Dui, and they go back to China. I think Hu Si went back to China, and later on go to Taiwan, and P.C. Chen stay in New Jersey, and then P.C. Chen become after World War II, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights drafting committee, and he tried to put the Confucius concept of the humanists in the first article, Article 1. Okay, so he think that's the non-religious, okay, universal concept. Okay, that's his contribution. And the Hu Si also important. If you go to the Wikipedia, if you search for Jiang Dui, you will see Jiang Dui's website also show Jiang Dui with Hu Si here. Okay, so that's his friend. And the Hu Si's great contribution is he changed today's Chinese writing, because before Hu Si, the Chinese writing is totally different than the way you speak. So Hu Si is the person who went back to China and make a revolution. He wants people start to write what you said. Okay. So today, when we read the Confucius or the ancient Chinese text, it's become very difficult because that's totally different than what we speak, and then read it like foreign language. So before we go on, that's the background. Okay, so then we can go through the paper. Okay, so any comment before we go to the paper? Okay, James, please.
I was just wondering if, do you think that either of these guys, who was the one in the picture? Was that who?
This
Hu
one,
Si?
Jiang Dui
Yeah.
and Hu Si. Jiang Dui.
Yeah. Do you think that either of these guys actually influenced John Dewey?
You mean Hu Si? No, Jiang Dui is his teacher.
Yeah.
Jiang Dui is the teacher. So Jiang Dui heavily influenced Hu Si a lot because he's teacher. Okay, so. Okay, so that's we have the two papers to read, and I will put a little bit more time on the first one. Okay, because the first one has a little bit more historical or like analect, okay, related to analect. So I will bring the original text so you will understand what the author talk about. And in general, I believe this two article is relatively easy. Unless somebody think that's difficult, but I assume it's easy. So unless you want to know more on the background. So this paper is just posted during after the pandemic in Australia. And then I think I'm pretty happy to choose these two papers because Yu Tao is a Chinese scholar and then teach in Australia. Okay. And another paper is from the American, and Michael Schumann is a Wall Street. He's an author, and he worked in China, stayed in China for a long time, and he wrote a book. So we have a different view, from outside and also inside, I think that we will get a pretty fair view on what's the Confucius and in today, the world of today. So let's go to the first paper, and then we will look at on the paper. So first, it talk about the, I think I already introduced the original text, right? Widely credited for creating a system of thought that we now call Confucianism. This learned man insisted he was not a maker, but a transmitter, okay? And merely that's not the reading we have been talking about. And then later on, Kang Youwei, which is 2,500 years later, okay, a leading reformer in modern China has argued, okay, when he say modern China, basically we talk about 19th century, okay, or early 20th century. Talk about Confucius, technically framed his revolutionary idea as the lost ancient virtue. So his argument will be met with fewer criticism and less hostility. So he kind of like talk about, because at that time, a lot of people, just like Hu Shi, okay, he is against the Confucius, okay. But at that time, people start to reflect, you know, why China got like in this situation, and then that must be the Confucius fault. Okay, so Kang Youwei as a conservative, okay, as a reformer, but in the attitude is more conservative than others. So he think about Confucius' idea actually is revolutionary, and he keep talking about the backward, okay, the old ancient kid, because that's the better way to convince the feudal lords during his time. So that's his way of thinking about. Then he talked about, he traveled around. So that's the Kang Youwei's thinking about the Confucius. Okay. So let's talk about a few Confucius idea. Okay, so here we talk about this one. So the key Confucius teaching, okay, is the greatest and the most influence. Just 1 minute. Okay, the idea is his concept of filial piety remain highly valued among young people in China. Here I put my comment on that. Okay, not when the author talk about China, basically we are talking about different countries. Okay. Taiwan, Japan, Korea, Singapore, and all the Eastern Asia society, okay, and including.
You're saying that he influenced all of them.
Excuse me?
I said you're saying that this teaching influenced all of those areas.
Yeah, all this area, and it also have a far-reach influence. Even the people immigrant to America or different place still keep this kind of concept. Okay, that means including me. Okay. We still keep this kind of concept. So this concept is very, very deep. Okay. Confucius want to restore the old political order by persuading rulers to establish moral standard. Okay. Exemplify appropriate social relationship. Important is social relationship. Okay. Performing time-honored ritual. Okay. The social relationship, ritual, and the social welfare is his focus, because during the time he see the situation has been changed, the old value has been changed. So you may not so surprised, okay, when you hear this kind of teaching, but if you compare to other school, you will know, you know, his teaching is very different, because when the feudal law asked the advisor, how can I make my country great? Okay, how can I conquer? Okay, unite the entire China? People have a different answer, but Confucius' answer is very different than the common sense. He said, "Be nice, right? Build a good relationship, social relationship. Have the social will for your people, keep the ritual, the old ritual, okay, then you can stabilize your state, and then that's the right thing to do. Unlike legalism, or they will tell you use punishment and the reward to control your people. Okay, so that's a very different idea. So I think today when we read Confucius, we should put the historical background on that. Okay, not just looking at the teaching he's talking about. Because think about the situation. If in the situation you can, when the feudal lord asks for how to govern my country, his answer is not technical. His answer is moral answer. So that's a very interesting part. You can say it's naive, it's not practical, but that's his answer, and that's what he changed the whole society, by his teaching. So one key difference is we will talk about this one, and he talk about you have to lead by the leader. The leader need to lead. Okay, so that's a different concept. Let me read this one. It would be the superficial reading Confucius to believe he called for unconditional obedience to the ruler or superior. Confucius advised a disciple not to deceive the ruler, but to stand up to him. So according to the author, Confucius want to re-establish the social order, and the social order is not egalitarian, okay, but they have the structure on that. But according to the author, if you misunderstand, okay, Confucius just want you to be 100% obedience. That's wrong, because Confucius really said you have to stand up in front of the ruler. Okay, so I will show the original text later. Okay, so you have a question? Anybody have a question?
I do have a question. I raised my hand.
Yeah,
I guess my question would be, in your opinion, do you think that Confucianism is sort of a leeway to the idea of communism?
We can talk about this later. Sorry, we can talk about this one because the communism is a very complex situation.
Obviously, I understand it's a more.
Yeah. Can you wait for the?
I'm just curious because obviously I think.
Yeah, there's a long discussion because and that's put on the first, at least for the first 1.5 on the more technical and side. So another teaching, according to the first paper, Confucius has defined the so-called xiao, filial piety, as a respecting parent, and his word is never divergent from the parent. That's the author's interpretation. I put a question mark here. Okay, I will talk about later. He talked about never. My opinion, he's talking about never diverge from the ritual, from Li. That's my opinion. But according to author, it's never divergent from parents. Okay, so kind of appearance, so-called obedience to your parent. So another thing, they also talk about Confucius expected the ruler to exemplify good family value. So the important thing is when Confucius has been asked how to govern my country, for the feudal lord ask, he will answer, you have to set an example, and the country, your state, just like a big family. That's his concept. So when Ji Kangzi is one of the powerful prime minister of Confucius' home state of Lu, asked about the advice on keeping people loyal to the reign, Confucius respond by asking the ruler to demonstrate the filial piety and the benignity, which is 慈 or kindness. So these two concepts also important when Confucius think about to keep keeping the people loyal to the state. The ruler himself or the high-ranking officer himself have to demonstrate you have this kind of moral quality, then you can make the people, follow you, and you can make your country, stable. So that's basically public health of the first paper. Okay, and then I'm going to bring any question or any comment to this point.
Yeah,
Charles,
I wanted to kind of provide some historical and socio-political context to, I think, a lot of what we're saying. Maybe perhaps some of the other participants may find it helpful. So kind of to go back to Confucius's time, one of the things that I think maybe not everyone is aware of is that it basically was one of the most chaotic periods in Chinese history. So basically it followed the fall of the Zhou dynasty, which was something that lasted 600 to 700 years. And it was in a period of the spring and autumn, as well as warring state periods Jason has alluded to, where they were fracturing to many, many different states. They were fighting wars. There was chaos all over. People were dying. People were suffering. And one of the ironies is that it's also in this period of great chaos that it also became the bedrock for the most intellectually vibrant period in Chinese history. So it was the period of hundreds of schools of thought. And why is that? It's because different people, so once you have a solid foundation, a country that's broken, then different people come out and try to explain the chaos, try to create philosophies and ways of running a country to create solutions to chaos. And Confucius was one of those philosophers during that time. And I would say that his philosophy focused on restoring a lot of the virtues that he identified with the previous dynasty that made it successful, and created a sort of stability, a philosophy for stability that would work in a socio-political sense for rulers of the country, in a sense that he really emphasized the virtues of everyone, the roles of everyone, and creating ideal society where everyone know their role and were ultimately ruled by the sovereign. I mean, in the Western kind of context, you have the philosopher king. I guess in the Chinese context, you have the sage king, the Confucian sage king, which would rule with benevolence as well as virtue. So that's kind of the historical context. And the irony of this and why it was the most intellectually vibrant period is because Confucianism became an extremely successful, through its various iterations, extremely successful political tool for the rulers. That essentially after Confucianism became a state ideology, it was successful enough to continue to dominate the Chinese intellectual, philosophy for the next, thousands of years. So, and to maybe provide further socio-political context, is that if you look at Chinese civilization, right, compared to Western civilization, which is heavily influenced by Abrahamic religion, right, people's lives, their morality was heavily influenced by the, Judaism, Christianity, and so forth. You think about China, China never really had a strong religion. Yes, there's Buddhism, there's Taoism, but none of these plays the role of Abrahamic religion in Western societies. So essentially, you look at Chinese folk religions as a bunch of shamanism stuff. So how does a bunch of superstitious shamanistic people, create a civilization, successful civilization? Essentially, Confucianism, with its emphasis on rituals, emphasis on how people should behave, acted as the the guidebook for people in a way that Christianity and the Bible did for Western countries. And this essentially provided the intellectual and moral foundation for Chinese civilizations. It provided intellectual foundation for the social contract between the ruler and the people and how the state organized. And in addition, Jason also alluded to earlier, the civil examination system is basically a way to propagate thought and to try to gather and rally the elites in a country, especially intellectual elites that ran the country. China has been famous for having a large, but also from a historical context, pretty successful bureaucracy that ran the country. And how was this bureaucracy established? Is through examination. Examination of what? Basically Confucian ideas. And essentially through that, you had the continuation of Confucian thought, the state ideology passed on for generations and generations. And the reason it basically also transmitted to all around Asia was because it's success. It was successful for thousands of years. And of course, people around China, and China was basically like the kind of the hegemon of the time. You can view it as Rome of Europe or United States as we have. So people around China, such as Korea, Japan, and Vietnam, copied the system. And I don't want to drag on too much, but I think another very profound aspect we need to pay attention to is why there was so much, for example, why did Mao try to attack Confucianism and so forth, and why did a lot of intellectuals? Is because Confucianism, because it was successful, it stayed relevant for a long time. But its success created its own demise, that it did not change with the times. So when Western civilizations, the Europeans became powerful, Confucianism kept China kind of conserve its ideology until one day the Chinese woke up and decided, oh man, we're so far behind. Why have we fallen so far? Why are we so backwards technologically, ideologically, and so forth? And of course, people pointed to Confucianism because it was the state ideology as the ills that led to China's downfall.
Sorry, Charles, I have to stop you here. Okay, and that's very good for the background information, and for sure we will welcome. Please talk about this.
Yeah, sure.
That's the subject we want to talk about.
I've gone on for quite a long time. Yeah.
Okay, but I appreciate your input. That's what I want to talk about later on. But thank you for bringing it up. Yeah, thank you. Mark, please.
Yeah, I'm curious, Jason, what you think about comparing the role Confucianism in Chinese society to Christianity in European society. Well, can you hear me?
Okay, I will put this question to the end. Okay, and then especially involve opinion. Okay, so for the opinion, I would like put it to the end. So today probably we don't have a lot of things to talk about. So I know today we will have a lot of opinion. Okay, in this kind of subject. So I don't prepare a lot of things, but I just want to make sure we go through on the technical part, because I know some of the people join us and they want to know what's exactly the writing and the real philosophy writing. Okay. So here, let's go back to some of these writing, and let me bring up a few texts from the Analect to prove or to show what the author talking about. So the author talk about it's not 100% blind obedience. Okay, according to the Analog. Okay, Zilu is one of Confucius' student. Ask how to serve the ruler. Confucius said, "Do not hide from him." Okay, somebody please mute. Okay, do not hide from him. Okay, that means do not cheat, be honest. And sometimes you need to confront him. That's my interpretation. Okay, in some case, you have to confront your ruler. So that means Confucius is not asking you to 100% obedience. Even he support the social hierarchical structure. He support respect your elder, respect the ruler, respect the minister, okay, the ranking system, but he doesn't say you have to 100% obedience, okay? So they have other texts, probably conflicts, but at least in this text, he's talking about don't cheat on him, okay, be honest, okay? And sometimes you have to confront him, okay? That means stay on you, be honest. Because if you're honest, you cannot be honest and always obedience, because, so that's he's talking about. Second thing, okay, that's also very famous. Why you talk about relationship? Okay, the Duke Jing of Qi, that's Confucius, the neighboring country. I believe this one happened during when Confucius escaped from his home country and go to the neighboring country, become the private advisor. Okay, so the Duke of Qi, the Duke Jing of Qi is Confucius about government. This answer is very interesting and very famous. Okay, Confucius said the government, when the prince is prince and the minister is the minister, the father is father, the son is son. Okay, so that's the government. So, let's think about a while. What's that mean? And that's what the author talk about. The social relationship is so important. And the Duke answered, good. If indeed the prince is not, the prince be not prince, the minister not minister, the father not father, the son not son, although I have wealth, can I enjoy it? So I cannot enjoy it if the relationship is not right. This one is very famous about Confucius' teaching. Okay, be a prince, look like a prince, behave like a prince. Father, behave like a father. Okay, and if a church son, behave like a son. So that's important concept. But of course, you will ask, what do you mean? You know, be a father. Okay, what do you mean? Look like or behave like a prince. That's another question. But that's the Confucius teaching on this part. So the other part is talking about. Remember, they also talk about the ask about filial piety. Okay, Confucius' answer is never divergent. Okay, so let me go a little bit on here. Because Meng Yizi, according to historical account, Meng Yizi is a high-ranking noble aristocrat in, I forget which country, but basically he is a high-ranking. And according to some historical account, he is the ancestor of Mencius. Okay, he asked about filial piety. Okay, what about filial piety? And the master said, never divergent. That's his word. He only said never divergent. Okay, so a lot of translator, a lot of interpreter will say, "Oh, you never disobey your parents." But another interpretation is you never disobey Li, which is the ritual. Okay, you never disobey this. Okay, so he didn't say anything. Okay, he just said never divergent or never disobey. Okay, he didn't say disobey. But from the context, I believe he said never disobey the ritual. Okay, so soon later, as Fan Ci is another Confucius student, and he being considered as not so smart. So every time, you know, he will ask question, we use him to ask question. He drive him, and then Confucius told him, okay, Meng Sun is Meng Yizi, asked me what the filial piety was, and I answer him, never divergent. So Fan Ci, who is not so smart, he will ask, what did you mean? Okay, and the Confucius answer is, the parents, when alive, be served according to the propriety, which is Li. When die, they should be buried according to proprieties. And the later, they should be offered sacrifice according to proprieties. So everything according to the propriety. When your parents are alive, you should treat them based on proprieties. And if they are dead, then you have to bury them according to the proper proprieties. And after that, then you have to worship them or offer the sacrifice to them, and according to proprieties. According to proprieties means not the more the better. You have to do it proper. That's his teaching, you know, in this one.
Jason, if I may just provide some context into the interrelationship between roles, virtue, and propriety, in case the audience, right? So again, like Confucius, if you look at what are the pillars of Confucianism, we have talked about roles, like the prince being prince, you know, all those things. But, you know, along with that, there's the presumption that with your role, there's the same duties, obligations, and virtues you have to follow. And this is why in the previous slide, it may seem almost like quite obvious on literal, reading it literally, of course, prince being the prince, but it's like, if you are the prince with a role, but you don't follow the virtues, you don't shoulder the obligations, then you are no longer the prince. And how does that relate to Li, which is the ritual? It's essentially a codified way of telling people, okay, what are the way that you fulfill your virtues? And if you make that comparison with the Bible, yes, there's any religion or Islam, there's a lot of very literal ways to tell people because let's face it, most people are not that smart. They need people to tell them what to do. And that's how Confucianism does it, giving people a lead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes, another way to explain this one is the rectification of name. Okay, everything have to according to the name, and then just like Charles talked about the probably the role. Okay, so here I'd like to point out is in the original. Okay, if I base on the analects, Confucius teaching about the moral actually is bi-directional. Okay, your father treat the son in this way, son treat the father in this way. He didn't set up like in the Western concept of if I do this way, then you do this way. I don't think he talked about this one, but he assumed, okay, we have to mutually do this one. Even he didn't say, okay, if my father doesn't love me, do I have to respect my father? Or if my son not do the filial piety to me, do I should be kind to my son? Okay, so he didn't say that. He just assumed, or he just asked people to do mutually. Okay, so that's probably later on we can discuss more detail. You know, what's the meaning or what's the how does people, okay, especially Chinese or Asian, practice his teaching. So last part of the analog reading. Okay, I'm not sure people like to read analog or not, but you know, we just have to go to that because that's important. If you don't like it, find it's boring, but just deal with for a few minutes. Okay, Ji Kangzi, that's another nobleman. Okay, ask how to make the people. I think he is kind of minister. I forget what's his role on this, but he concerned about the loyalty. So Ji Kangzi asked how people respect, how can I make people respect their ruler, be faithful to him, how to encourage the people to be virtuous. Okay, that's kind of the ruler or administrator is thinking about. So Confucius' answer is, let him, that means the ruler, okay, preside over them, the people, with solemnity. Okay, he have to be, you know, it cannot like moving around. I don't know what he means, but basically be solemn. Okay, and they will respect him. Okay, and then let him be filial. Okay, be filial, xiao. Okay, that means as a ruler, you have to treat your parents well. That's the filial piety. And the kind, treat your children nice, so-called 慈, benignity. Then they will be faithful to him, to you. That means, you know, you have to do it well. Right? If you want your people respect you, be faithful to you, you have to treat your parents according to the xiao, and treat your children, okay, be nice, okay, as 慈, and then your people will be faithful to you. And then who is speaking? Okay. And then you will eagerly seek for virtues. So basics, you see, Confucius' teaching, okay, the ruler asked a technical question, and the Confucius' answer is moral. Okay. So here, for example, very simple situation, how can I make my people be faithful or loyal to me? Okay. And the Confucius' answer is, you have to be loyal to your father, to your Lord, and be nice to your children, okay, and then the people will be faithful to you, will be loyal to you. That's Confucius' answer. Any comment? Okay, and let's go to the last part. Okay, I think on this paper, and the author also talking about Ren. I think we have one complete section about months ago talking about Ren. What's the meaning of Ren, which has, I think, in analog only have 10,000 characters, but Confucius, okay, they discuss Ren, okay, 100 times. So that means every 100, there's 1% of the word, okay, talk about Ren, okay, so it's a lot. So I think the author doing a good job to correct all the definition of Ren, okay, call it the benevolence, humanity, humanism, goodness, okay, and then another way to look at it is also have the meaning of free from worry, also a meaning for the result, and the firm, okay, and be respectful, tolerance, trustworthy, probably like all the good things, you know, will accumulate to run. Okay, so our purpose is not discuss what is Ren. Okay, we already have a discussion about Ren, and I will have another discussion about Xiao. Okay, that's also another deep concept on that. So far, the paper already talked about the Confucius future and all this one. Then let's talk about after Confucius died. Okay, what's going on? What kind of Confucius? So far, we already done with what Confucius teaching and what he did and what's his philosophy. So after he died, his influence is great in China. Okay, for example, Mencius. Okay, just like Charles mentioned, during that time is very bad time, a lot of war. But in Mencius' time, which is so-called the warring state, the situation even worse. Okay, because at that in Confucius' time, they just fighting each other and try to expand their territory. In Mencius' time, they even forgot they have the common emperor, the Zhou dynasty. They try to unite the China. Okay, they want to put all China in their reign. So the situation even worse. So we come with all different kind of set of idea to advise the feudal lords. Mencius, I think 2 weeks ago, Pin talked about it. He gave advice, right? Why you talking about the benefit? You talk about the righteousness. Okay, there's many things to talk about. Don't just talk about the profit, benefit, right? And then another Confucius scholar, Xunzi, he talked about take a totally different approach. He think, okay, human nature is bad. Okay, so you want to make the human nature good, you have to put the education, make teacher learning, train the people, so people become good. So different idea. Then also have a different school. They criticize Confucius, right? Like Moism, we haven't introduced yet. Moism talk about the universal love, okay? So unbiased love. You are not just love your parents, your children, like Confucius talking about. Moism is talking about, oh, you should love everybody, just like, you know, your parents and your kids, right? Then this world will become peaceful. That's his teaching. So it's very similar to Christian teach about the love. Okay. Then we also have the Taoism teaching, which we talk about like kind of a checkout. Okay, go back to the nature. Okay, doing so-called wu wei. Okay, without action, action without action. We'll talk about this later. And the legalism, like Han Fei, talk about punishment and the reward. Okay, make your country great. So that's all happened after Confucius died in the different situation in China, which is a warring state. Okay, so there have many schools come out. Okay, so and you know the history. Let me just brief talk about. So basics to the Han Dynasty, that Confucianism become the orthodoxy of the state, and later on we have the Neo-Confucianism, and to the late 19th century, early 20th century, Hu Shi is the leader. We just introduced. He is the student of Jiang Dui. He said, like, you want to overthrow the house of Confucius. He think Confucius is not good for China, and he want to promote democracy, freedom, science. So he viewed Confucius as anti-freedom, anti-individualism, anti-democracy, anti-science. Okay, so that's his view, and that's Hu Shi. And Mao Zedong, okay, after the People's Republic of China, he want to totally denounce the reject the Confucianism. Okay, so and probably you know the Cultural Revolution happened. That's totally want to remove the thinking of Confucius and teaching. Okay, so we talk about this one later. That's just the history, and bring to the end. And another scholar, P.C. Chen, okay, so I just quote on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So after the compromise, he want to reject all the Christian, not Christian, all the religious word, okay, in the United Nations. So eventually he put all human beings are born free and equal in dignity, dignity and the rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience. Okay, this concept is Confucius teaching, should be acted toward one another in the spirit of brotherhood. That's before he's talking about put the concept of the ren, which is very difficult to translate. So turn out put the spirit of brotherhood. So I quote from Wikipedia. I think it's very interesting. Okay, Dr. Chen suggests that. I think this writing is from Roosevelt, I think. Okay, Dr. Chen suggests that the Secretariat might well spend a few months studying the fundamental of Confucianism. Okay, so that brings to the end of the first paper. And then the reason I quote this one, that's personally, I think that's very correct, because when Confucius teach his disciple, think about his disciple. His disciple is not regular people. His disciples are all not like Jesus' disciple. They are fishermen, tax collector. No, Confucius' disciples are great people. They are government officers. Confucius is teaching them how to be a good ruler, be a good government administrator. So Dr. Chen, this statement is very truly reflect what Confucius is teaching. His teaching is not talk to you and me. He's talking to the government officials. So in this sense, Dr. Chen is very right. Okay, the Secretariat might spend a few months to study the fundamental of Confucius, and same as all the government should spend some time to study Confucius. That's just a personal 2 minutes opinion on this one. So we end on this paper. Let's take a few minutes if you have something to talk about, and then the modern China. We will. I think the next paper is much easier. Not a lot of historical account to talk about. I will briefly go through. Then we can talk about the second subject, which is the modern China, and a few questions raised at the beginning about the contradiction of the modern China Mao Zedong against the Confucianism, and how about today they are support the Confucianism, right? And then I think Joe also want to talk about the sustainability. Okay, the issue we can discuss later. So we have hands up. Who's hands up? I have. Let me see. Okay, Quendy. Yeah.
Yes. I would like only to bring one translation of the word run that I like very much. I don't know if you heard of Michael Billington. Michael Billington is an American intellectual related to the Lyndon LaRouche movement.
Okay.
And he used the Greek word, the agape, A-G-A-P-E, agape to translate run. And as you might know, agape means divine love, okay? And meaning that it's a love that is of a higher level than the simple human love. However, I think he brought something very interesting on the epistemological level. Because for him, the divine love, agape or ran, is not simply benevolence, but it's an epistemological level where you have a deep joy when you participate to the creation of the universe by having the capability to discover, to create, to invent, okay? And by that very human activity of creativity, discovery, inventivity, you feel that deep joy, and that deep joy will make you broadly with other human beings. So it's something deeply related to the broadness of your mind. and not
Yeah,
and it's and not the resound of preaching, because you know well that preaching doesn't work.
Yeah, I agree with you. Apartheid is a good word to that, but I just kind of the challenging you, right? Apartheid has some problem to me. Apartheid probably more suitable to the Moism teaching, the universal love or unbiased love. And then I would like to, just for the sake of argument, to challenge on the Apartheid translation of Ren, because Ren also means the extension, right? You treat your parent and your grandparent, your ancestor, your neighbor, they have the degree of difference. It's not like universal. And apartheid is kind of the universal. That's the part I kind of say the problem of use apartheid. So, okay.
Well, the strange thing that I agree with absolutely with what you said. And I think that the value of the agape from Michael Billington is much more the focus on the epistemological development rather than the moral preaching, okay? Because you know very well that someone would be kind because he attained a certain level of mind development, and not because he listened to some preachers, because the second thing never worked.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because Ren is a big subject. I think both you and me probably agree.
It's a big subject. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I kind of like a little bit feel a little bit disappointed because I've dedicated one section to talk about Ren, and still have people and they tell me I don't understand. So I kind of feel like I don't know if the Confucius didn't do a good job or I did do a good job. So anyway, and let me think about it. That's a big question, you know. So probably Chinese discussed for 2,000 years, never got a solution. I should not expect myself find the solution. So,
but I think it's a sign that it's a good thing for Chinese philosophy, because if you can deal with a concept of Chinese philosophy in half an hour, it means that it's not a profound philosophy.
Yeah, okay, but anyway, the reason we just, you know, any kind of criticism, you know, I'm fine. You know, I think I'm not here to promote. Okay, I'm not here to criticize. I'm here
You're
to
the best, Jason. Thank you.
Yeah,
I said you're the best.
Yeah. Okay. So let's have hands up. Charles, please.
Yeah. It's interesting to see this this idea of an influence in the discussion of human rights. My understanding of Confucius is very thin. I know very little, but so far what I've heard is that he supports the idea of a social hierarchy, which you also see in Plato and Aristotle. And neither of those people would be a good person to start a theory of human rights if it's based on the idea of freedom and equality, because those go against hierarchy.
Yeah, I think we need to put this way, right? In this time, we call it the actual age. Okay, then across the state, you can go any place, even in the American, right? I mean, at that time, 500 BC, Europe, Greek, all the place is a hierarchical society. And men dominate in the world. So it's not fair to criticize the philosopher or anybody that time, you know, you support the social hierarchy, you are not respect the woman, you are the, you know, you don't say that two sex, two gender are equal. I think that's not fair to criticize them. But, you know, put in this content, just like, you know, Jesus also support the slavery system. And
right. I wasn't exactly, my point wasn't to criticize, but merely to say that there seemed to be a contradiction. And so maybe if I ask it another way, in the beginning of the Declaration of Human Rights, the idea is that there's some Confucian idea there. And so I guess what I'm really asking is, what is the Confucian idea that would best match this idea of equal dignity and rights?
You are right. I think I will bring up the later part of the last slide. The mentions is more on this side. Okay, so Confucius at that time not talk about too much. At least I don't know. Okay, Let's go.
Charles, this doesn't directly answer your question, but I think one of the key difference between Western and Eastern kind of thought is that even though, yes, freedom on its flip side is kind of obligation, right? But I think in Eastern thought, Confucian thought, it emphasizes the obligation duties of the people more than their rights. I don't know if that kind of helps.
Yeah,
answer.
I agree with you. Yeah, Charles, thank you. I agree with you. But that's another thing we are going to discuss pretty soon. And we have hands up. Let's go through from what is it? Joseph and Karen and Mark. Joseph, please.
Hi, I have a very specific question with regards to Neo-Confucianism. My understanding is that in terms of adoption of that philosophy as a state level, Korea was the only one, actually Chosun was the only one who actually adopted that particular philosophy. And so my understanding is that it's a more fundamentalist view of Confucianism, a little bit more strict with regards to gender relations. Is that a correct analysis? What were the primary differences between like regular and Neo-Confucianism?
Yeah, I think you missed the meetup 2 weeks ago. I talked about this one. Yeah, but I would say you are right. Okay, 100% correct, but not overall, not cover all the truth, but the truth is too big to cover. But basically, I say you are right, become more strict. But another way to look at it is they bring the rationality to Confucianism. Okay, so I will stop here, but it's much more to talk about the Neo-Confucius. Okay, so thank you for bringing up this one. Then we have Karen, please.
Oh, I just wanted to add to the previous comments that I agree that from the reading, it seems like Mencius is more directly connected to the idea behind the Declaration of Human Rights. But even in Confucius, I think it's important to remember that democracy and sort of universal rights don't necessarily have anything to say about hierarchy. It's more about how people assume roles within that hierarchy and, you know, whether there's flexibility in motion on who gets to fill what role, right? So this idea that there are responsibilities with each position in society can be very much part of a democracy, right? So in ancient Greece, yeah, you're given roles by lottery, but there were things to do when you were in that role, right? So the idea that whatever, I think so, if it is true in Confucius that wherever you were in society, you had a sort of inner, you know, relationship to virtue such that there was a way to do that role correctly. That could contribute to this idea of a universal dignity. But, you know, it does sound like the hierarchy was a sort of natural given hierarchy in many ways that might seem anti-democratic, and that you need more developments in the tradition of Mencius, maybe suggesting that there are times when it's appropriate to take steps to change the hierarchy, right? To get the idea of democracy, that it is the, you know, the support of the governed that gives legitimacy to any hierarchies or something like that. That doesn't seem to be here, but just from the very brief reading of the reading, I can see how there's some, even in the original Confucius, some, you know, gesturing to the human dignity of all individuals.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. We have Mark and Yan. And Mark, please.
Yeah, I have two questions for anybody, maybe Peter, but anybody who wants to speak on them. One is I have heard that Confucius formulated something very similar to the golden rule, but in the negative, which is do not do to others what you would not have them do to you, or something to that effect. And and I wanted to hear whether that was correct or not. And then the other thing is, could that be interpreted, especially by a Declaration of Human Rights that's dominated by a lot of like Western European countries with a Christian tradition, to be kind of a basis of human rights? Because that in and of itself, although a lot of other things about Confucianism, like the filial piety specifically, seem very hierarchical, that particular aspect does not, that particular saying to me at least does not seem particularly hierarchical. So if anybody wanted to comment on those things, I'd be really
Okay, Mark. Okay, Mark, your second question, I will put on the hold on the later part. Okay, because we'll talk about the more universal thing. And the first question about the so-called Silver Road, and then I can answer you the text. He said, I think it's Zilu, one of his students, Zigong, I think one of his students asked about how to do the government. And his answer is, when you go out, just like you are welcoming an important guest, if anything you don't want to be imposed, don't do it on the others. So remember, he's not talking to you, he's talking to the government officer. Okay, when you put the policy, you have to think about it. Do you want to, as a people, you want to receive this one? If you don't want to receive, you don't do it. That's his explanation on this one. And of course, we can call this one golden rule if you apply to you, to anybody. But original text, he's teaching one of the disciples how to make government, how to be a good officer, or because of, I forget the question, but basically that's the account. The first answer is, when you go out, you should always be like proper, okay, just like you are receiving an important guest. So I think that's his answer. Okay, so we have a few hands up. Let's be brief, and we have enough time to discuss, and I would like to go through a few items. Okay, so let's go from Charles, Madeline, and Yan.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about regarding kind of human rights, those things. As I hear a couple of participants kind of ask about that. So my view on that is regarding kind of Confucianism. It's not, there's no direct contradiction. There's no like mutually incompatibility within Confucianism with human rights. But you have to kind of understand that its assumption of Confucianism is that there is a hierarchy, but it's a meritorious hierarchy, that everyone who is within a hierarchy is there because their virtue or because their ability, and they're there so they can make the best decision for the population. So to make an analogy, right, NBA, right? I want to play in the NBA, they won't let me because I'm not good enough. But we don't rail against the NBA not being, democratic in terms of having everyone who wants to play go play. We accept it because they're the best at what they do. Even when we elect our officials, the implicit assumptions that we elect the best people to run the country, so we don't have a vote on everything. So when it comes to Confucianism and why it was successfully adopted by, obviously authoritarians for thousands of years, is that it provides the justification that their rule is more merited. They provide the best outcome for people. And even today, you see in modern China, there is that strain of thought, which is that even though it's not democratic in terms of process, in terms of outcomes, they really focus on outcome, that if the government provides justification that we provide outcome that looks after your interests, then there is sort of that justification for, I don't know, democracy or rights without having a democratic process.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Charles. And I just look at the chat, okay, and Charles asked me to pronounce how to say Confucius in Chinese. Okay, let's say Kongzi, and then that's the name, just a little bit. It was, I think, the Jesuit. Okay, so they supposed to be Confucius, and they just put the Roman spelling that become Confucius, and right now become his name. Okay, just brief on this. I think the Judith had a hands up, cannot have raised hand. I think somebody told me this. Is Judith here?
Me?
Yeah. Somebody told me you had a hands up for a long time. I didn't call you, so sorry about this.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. I just feel Confucius, how to say, Confucius is more studied by people who either from Asian China or maybe current China who studied in East Asian or Eastern country who studied the Confucianism, but more like a study by the Western people. I came from China, but I don't know this. I only know the name of Confucius, but I don't know what he's talking about until now. And I realized he want to helping people to do the, that means in the timeless life, which in Bible is eternal life. But he want to telling people being modestly and being humbly, be virtuous, but he don't know. He want a leader, that means the political leader, to guide people to doing this. So I think maybe he failed. That's why he is unemployed. And a lot of people you're talking about who study him, they want to help to. They also want to help people by spread his words. But they all either like maybe their own community leader or the business owner. This kind of. But from Confucius himself, he wanted the political leader who can implement this idea. I think they certainly concern, like you said, when he died, what to do, right? But I feel like letting people to do the good things is very important. But this is a lack of in China, like school. We don't study this thing. I think they should put something in this, like the children study this kind of, like say how to filial piety. Yeah, they should put something like teach people, but it's not important who. It's not the political leader who can implement control people's life, but this is all, they go the wrong direction. So this has to be, but in Bible said it has to be Jehovah, but this is my religion, it's one God. So, but it's not, you don't expect people to know the Bible knowledge because it's so complicated. And it's not easy to understand, but if you can make connection, they probably similar. But a lot of people, it's like Buddhism, they want to hear the words they can understand. So maybe Confucius, he has a lot of study, means teaches, make people easy to understand. That's why he has so many followers. So I think,
thank you, Judith. Bring the current situation in China, I don't know, because in my age, we were forced to memorize all the analyte. So,
but they should be aware to teach people, because when my childhood, I don't get this teach, so I probably go.
That's this subject later. Okay, on hold later. Because that's a big subject, very big subject. Like we can ask people in America, even in Greeks, do they read all the Platonic dialogue or not? Right? Probably the answer is no. They don't want to read it. Too boring. And and we are a selected group because we are curious, we are interested what the angel will do, So that's here I create a space we can discuss. Technically, I also in another group, probably we talk about the Greek philosophy, we talk about the play of the Oedipus the Rex, right? That's a real story why you marry your mother and kill your father. So a lot of things we can talk about, but let's go to who's next? Madeline?
I think I am. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to go to Charles's point. I think he was insinuating this, and the woman that just came before me. So I think the very idea that we're putting someone in a position to determine who is best at what in society is the almost opposite of democracy. And I think it almost takes away personal freedom. I understand that he gained so much popularity and so many followings, but I also think there's a huge element that we kind of look over, in a sense, when we do study his philosophy, in the sense that we are giving this man power to determine who should do what and be where in society based on what he believes is their best, highest potential. Whether or not he's right or wrong is irrelevant to the fact that we gave him the power to determine that. So that's why I think it negates huge, very, very strong elements of democracy and freedom. But I wanted to go to Charles. I don't know if it was Charles, but the C that came up, he didn't have a face in it. But he was saying that he wants the most optimal society, so he gives each person a position, a spot in society. hierarchically. And I'm saying that the fact that he is determining that is what takes away democracy.
Yeah, okay. That's
Sarah,
another,
I think
so,
you're probably referring to me.
Okay.
If I may kind of clarify.
Okay, just 10 seconds, please.
I'm not saying I disagree. I'm not
Oh,
saying
yeah,
anything is
it's
wrong
fine.
with what you said. I'm just saying the fact that there is this man that everyone gave the power to by way of support and political support is in a position to
Okay,
determine
Sarah, that's-
he does this because he's the best at that. She'll do this because that's taking away each person's individual freedom to determine that for themselves.
Okay, hold on. Let's stop here for a while. Okay, we have a chance to talk about this, and then I have a few slides I want to show. Let's quickly go to Mandarin and Yan, and I'm going to move on, and then you are free to discuss this kind of question because I know discussion will be on the table, but I want to put it on the end. Mandarin, please.
Yes, I was looking at all of this and thinking about how it's all made to be applied to other human beings, and what this would look like if we applied it to the rest of the natural world, not just to our own species. And I know it's a huge topic. It's not part of the conversation, but I know that we're moving on in just a minute to the influence on modern communism and modern China aspect. And China, like everywhere else, has a population boom and not an unlimited amount of resources. And I don't know if there's any movement at all going on in China in the upper echelons or wherever to apply this type of philosophy to the natural world in terms of their communist capitalist hybrid society.
That's it. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Okay, let's stop here because that's another subject that we probably. Okay, then we have Yan. Brief. Okay, please.
Okay, yeah. I have a question concerning your first page there with all the chronology based on age. What can you give some examples of what Confucius meant when he was a 70, said he could do whatever he desired, but not make mistakes?
Oh, I don't have the example. But you can assume, I think that what he meant is he doesn't need outside control, right? For example, you throw me to the island and nobody else, I still behave moral. I think that's what he meant. And any example, I don't. Okay, but that's
okay. His own morality as well as he's self-disciplined enough to be to follow his own teachings.
Yeah. So in a way, he achieved the highest Taoism teaching, right? I just do whatever I want. My behavior is moral already. So that's his.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may, just 5 seconds. Okay. I think that what he means by that is that even his desires is in accordance with the natural laws of the universe. He doesn't even have bad desires.
Yeah, you can talk about this way. Yeah, that many way. Okay, so let me quickly go through the second paper because anybody want to talk about the modern Chinese situation. So I hope you read this one. And I personally think the writer, the author, he put it pretty, at least I agree on his opinion. He said, even though often did not adhere to Confucius' principle. All right, I think we need to move quickly. So he focused, he put the 3 points, in the Confucius, he talked about the Confucius timeless and universal. So on economics, government have the responsibility to take care of the well-being of all humans, of all citizens. On education, Confucius focused on the learning as an essential practice for self-improvement. And on the politics, and then the author think, the Confucius maybe realize, the government should be make decision. The ideal Confucius was with virtue. So put the virtue on this one. And I think that's everybody want to talk about, the democracy, right? Many have argued that Confucianism is inherently anti-democratic, and since it's focused on responsibility, not on the right. Okay, on the Western philosophy, we focus more on the right, on the community, not on the individual. I believe That's the truth. Okay, but Mencius, he here the author bring up the Mencius. Mencius, he famously said that people have the right to choose them. I don't think Mencius really say that, but I will bring the text. Okay, and then let me bring the text of what he meant this part. Mencius famously said, okay, I believe this text doesn't have the context who asked what, but I believe that's the Mencius answer to the one of the feudal lord. Okay, when Mencius said, the people are the most important. Okay, and the second important is the state. But in Mencius' original word means the temple of the state. Okay, is the next, and the king is the lightest, the least important. And then he gives the further example. Becoming an emperor, you need the support from the people. But becoming a feudal lord, you only need the support from the emperor. Become a minister, you need the support from the feudal lord. So I think that he is responding to the question when the feudal lord think about how can he unite the entire China. Mencius' answer is very interesting. He said, you want unite the entire China, become the emperor of China, you need the support from the people. But if you just stay as a feudal lord, you only need the emperor to support you. If you want to be the minister, you only need the feudal lord to support you. So that's his answer to the people. And I think that's, let me end here. I know a lot of people want to talk about the China situation, democracy. Okay, so here I will bring the conclusion for the author talk about. He talked about the the author tried to set the reality that many Confucians influence society, like South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, has become the democracy country. Okay, even they still have the Confucius teaching in this society. So also the opinion, I think one of what he said is we cannot use culture to explain the outcome. I think that's very true because even China doesn't go to democracy. Okay, doesn't matter China practice Confucianism or not, but we can show the proof. The South Korean, Japan, Taiwan, basics, they have the value of Confucianism and they still go to democracy. There's no conflicts here. And in my opinion, the place like China, Korean, and Japan probably has the best political system at this moment because the government official still have the concept of the Confucianism, okay, and the society already adopt the Western democracy and the freedom. So turnout become the Confucius teaching is teaching the government official, not just teaching the people. So I think that's bring a good hybrid in the system. That's just my personal opinion. And right now, time is almost up, and I would like to open to a lot of questions. For example, we can discuss, I think James want to talk about, is that the contradiction, okay, between when the Mao Zedong is anti-Confucianism and right now Xi Jinping basically support the Confucianism. Okay, so that's another thing, one thing we can talk about. And then Joe want to talk about sustainability for this one. And then anybody want to talk about, please? Charles, please.
Yeah, so just want to echo what Jason alluded to, that Confucianism itself is not fundamentally in contradiction with democracy, as the examples of East Asian Confucian societies have shown. But at the same time, if to answer, I think Sarah's kind of point about, I think there is certain, you do have to recognize that there are certain fundamental perspective differences between Asian and Western thinking, in a sense that especially modern Western society, look at how modern Western countries are formed, democracy is the basis, justification for legitimacy within a country. That is, you go to China, ask the average Chinese person, that is simply not what they consider. And I think oftentimes, a lot of people want to see, I want to see democracy in China, but I think sometimes we come across with this tone deaf that the people in China, they care about outcome. They don't see democracy as the end, they see it as a means to good governance. they also see, Confucianism a similar vein, in a sense that if Confucianism can provide good outcomes, good governance, they don't really care whether it's democratic or not democratic. If they have meritorious rulers, kind of like similar to Singapore, which people question how much of democracy it is, people are still supportive.
Yeah, thank you, Charles. Yeah, it's
Right.
I just have to say I agree with you.
Just real quick, 2 seconds. But I'm just saying that I think you and I agree. I never disagreed with you. I was just pointing out that I think the fundamental of democracy in itself is not covered under his philosophy, because I get what you're saying, and I agree with you. But I think the fact that he is determining it for everyone is what my point was.
I think, Sarah, I think we fully understand that, because we cannot expect the ancient people talk about democracy. Okay, so and just like Jesus not say that didn't abolish.
That's true too.
Yeah,
that's very true.
So it's make no sense to blame on your failure. You blame on your failure based on you attribute your failure based on ancient teaching. I think that's totally wrong. Okay, you have your own decision. You cannot say I cannot do this because Confucius to teach this. So that's nothing like this, and nothing like today's society because Confucius teaching. I think that's all wrong. That's all you can make decision. That's
yeah. Sorry, really quickly. Yeah, Sarah, I understand. I don't think we're in too much disagreement here. The only thing I'd like to point out is I think perhaps my understanding is that you see Confucius as somebody who dictated this very concrete set of virtues, and therefore he is the one who is calling the shots as to who is meritorious or not. I think maybe if you look at it more metaphorically, is that in modern Confucian societies, including China, the idea of a meritorious or virtuous type of ruler or whatever official in whatever position still exists, but they don't necessarily have to conform to the ancient Confucian standards. So it's not like Confucius is still calling the shots from his grave of 2,500 years of what is a good person. It's more the idea of the person in charge or in whatever position should have the commensurate virtues. And that in some ways can be interpreted in a democratic sense, except it's more implicit as to, okay, the population supports this person because he's meritorious. The same way it's implicit that when we elect a leader, we elect someone who's meritorious, but it's just not, there's no explicit democratic mechanism, like you said, in Confucianism.
Okay, so that's hold on here. Okay, so let me go to I have a lot of hands up. Okay, let me go from this side. Madeline, Mark, and Joseph, Quinn, and Yan. Okay, Madeline, please.
Yes, this is actually a question along the lines of what Charles was just saying. I was wondering if the Confucianism, as it was practiced, that Mao disliked so much, is the same thing that Xi Jinping is, sorry, I've just completely mangled his name, is the same thing that they're talking about, or are they talking about two very different applications of it? So if you could just do some rectification of names here, that would be great.
Yeah, that's another big question, So I can say it quickly, okay, because before you get the power, okay, then if you are revolutionary, you probably don't want the Confucius. But when you are stable in power, you think Confucius is great because you can keep the social order. So that's why, there's no conflicts, but just depend on how you're going to use it. And that's back to my idea, you don't contribute or blame on any ancient teaching, okay, on today's situation, because the teaching is teaching. They have their own situation. There's no excuse, and then you just do whatever is right. So
yeah, Madeline, the modern political context to this is that if you look at China's history, right, first it overthrew the the old society, right? So communism, it was in their interest to overthrow the old dynasties and Confucianism, and then they became in power. So following the disastrous years of Mao, Deng Xiaoping, opened up and started adopting, market principle and so forth. So what happened over the last 30 years is China became more market oriented and less, communist or whatever, and also more westernized. So the current political driver for this is that Xi Jinping is trying to reestablish kind of the Chinese identity or de-Westernize. So how do you de-Westernize? Is that you try to find something that has more Chinese roots, right? Even like your Marxism itself is now, Chinese. So this is the way if you view it as what is the political kind of motivation for that, he's trying to de-Westernize by hearkening back to something with explicit Chinese roots.
Yes.
Okay, yes, so it would be borrow a corpse to resurrect the spirit.
Yeah, that's a good one.
One of the 36 from Sun Tzu.
Yeah, that's another thing we can talk about later. It's okay. Let's move on. Okay, Mark, please.
Yeah, I'd like to make a general point about culture and democracy. I think that democracy has a lot more to do with level of economic development than it does with the particularities of ancient culture. If you look at the countries that people talked about as examples of Confucian societies that became democratic, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. I'll look at South Korea and Taiwan specifically because I think they're very emblematic of this. These countries only became democratic after they developed economically to a great extent. Now, some people here have more knowledge maybe of Taiwan and South Korea than I do.
Yeah, thank you, Mark.
And if you think I'm wrong, please push back. But at the end of the civil wars in Korea and China, Taiwan and South Korea, my impression is, were quite repressive societies. And in both those places, there were massacres of political opponents. So they weren't actually, at that time, like in the 49, 53, they weren't particularly any more democratic than their communist opponents. It's only later, after those societies developed economically to a high degree, that South Korea and Taiwan democratized, like in the mid 80s or so. Mainland China and North Korea have just as much a Confucian legacy as South Korea and Taiwan. So it seems to me the difference is that South Korea and Taiwan developed economically faster and sooner than North Korea and mainland China. And that explains the difference in political rights much more than any kind of ancient cultural references. And you can see the same thing if you look at the Islamic world, like the most democratic countries in the Islamic world, Malaysia, Indonesia, Turkey, and Tunisia generally are more economically developed than a lot of the other Islamic countries, which are much poorer. You have the exception of the Gulf states, but those are kind of weird because their economic development is all centered around just resource extraction.
Okay.
So that's my general point. And I specifically like some feedback on my comments about Korea and Taiwan versus their communist counterparts, if anybody has an opinion on that.
Well, I can answer your question. I feel I grew up in Taiwan, and then I know how depressed when I grew up in the Chiang Kai-shek reign. And then I have to kind of disagree on what you talk about economic bring the democracy. I will say democracy go first, because when that time I was in the part of fighting for the democracy. So bring me a lot of trouble, but I stop here. But basically that's the situation. Personal belief, I don't like dictatorship. I always support freedom. And then, okay, sorry. Okay, that's it. Joseph, please.
Hi, yeah, I had a question about Confucius's legacy with regards to gender relations, because one of the things that I noticed is that, China and Korea and Japan, they get stereotyped as being very, very sexist, particularly towards women. But when I was in Korea, for example, one of the culture shocks I had was when I was walking on the street with a couple of my friends, guy friends, and there were women walking by themselves, like high school girls walking by themselves at night in a big city. And I've never ever seen that in an American city, particularly in San Francisco, because I was actually attacked over the beginning of the pandemic in San Francisco. So like there's like, in American cities, you don't normally see people going out outside, particularly single women. And one of the things that I was wondering is obviously, particularly Japan and South Korea have very high gender gap pay ratios. But it seems that in terms of things like sexual assault, things like rape, it seems like East Asia seems to be a lot safer. Like, I think the statistics are like, from what I've seen at least, America, I think 1 in 3 women will experience sexual assault in their lifetime, and 1 in 4 will experience some form of rape. And so, and I think the statistics, at least for South Korea, are like many times lower. And so I was wondering if it has to do with Confucius's idea of following by the book, going by the rules, following tradition, even if it's like, you get what I'm saying? Like, there's a difference in terms of how they approach gender relations. And I was wondering if you could speak more on that.
Well, I think everybody have a different view. I appreciate that you share this information, and then I just like to mention on the historical situation is after the Neo-Confucianism, the Chinese society become more conservative. Okay, so the more restrict on women. Okay, so that's another big question. How come a rationality movement, okay, supposed to be more rational, how can become more conservative? That's another big question. Okay, so that's the thing. Not totally blame on Confucius' teaching. If you have to blame on somebody, I think Neo-Confucius will be more guilty than Confucius, and not necessarily the scholar on the Neo-Confucius fault. Probably the government how to exercise this kind of academic teaching. So that's many things we can talk about, but it's not an easy question. Anybody want to comment on this one? That'll be welcome. And let's go to Quinn first.
Sorry, I just activate my microphone. Okay, so I just want to remind everyone here that Confucianism is first and foremost an educational program to create a gentleman, okay, a gentleman or a gentlewoman, the junzi. Okay, so the rest, I don't mean that the rest is not important, okay, but for Confucianism, the core value is to create the gentleman, the man capable of respect, of shame, of commiseration, and of having wisdom. So from that basis, they expect that people who are higher placed in society, the rulers, either in a democratic society or not, because they have wisdom, the sense of rituals, the sense of respect, the sense of humanity, would be capable to help those who are less endowed with those moral qualities. I think that's the core of Confucianism. And the other thing that I would like to say, that when the Chinese Empire in 136 BC decided to accept Confucianism as the official doctrine, of course that they were abuses because of position of power. And almost 2,000 years later, when Mao Zedong started the revolution in 1949, the Confucianism that has been destroyed was not the Confucianism that was the educational program to create the junzi, but the feudal Confucianism of abuses of people in power. And now I think that what the Chinese people want is to return precisely to that wisdom, to that educational program that at the core wants to create the 君子. We say the gentleman, but of course nowadays we have to remind that Confucianism also want to create gentle women, of course. And that is the core of Confucianism. And I think that somebody also said that, but I just want to take 20 seconds for that. The question of political legitimacy, of course, is not always by electoral system, because if democracy means the power of the people, it means the power of the people who are capable to get what they want. And if they want safety, food, and education for their children, any system that would be capable to guarantee safety, food, and education for their children is basically democratic. Okay, I think it has been said before, in the sense that democracy is not always by the electoral system, but by the outcomes too. And I think that there is a global debate now because of China economical success since the last 3 decades. I think that it provoked a global debate. What is truly democracy? Is it the electoral system, or is it the guarantee of safety, food, and education for the citizens? And I stop here.
All right, thank you, Quen. Yeah, just like to support what Quen talked about 君子. Okay, generally it's translation as a gentleman, but I think another translation is the moral agent. Okay, so Confucius used this term 君子 as a like moral agent. Okay, whenever you want to be, it's a just like a人, you put a name on that and put all the good attribute on 君子. We'll talk about this one later. Yan, please.
Okay, well, my question was related to that, meaning that during that 5 years that he was an administrator, how did he, educate the people towards that end? I mean, how successful was he?
Well, okay, I happen to read some of this, and he kind of take care of the security of the state, and I think the reason he got fired. Okay, of course, that's the historical account is totally biased because it's recorded by his student. So he said after 3 months, the state become peaceful. Okay, everything in order. Okay, that's what his student said. Okay, and then the reason he got fired because I forget that's one powerful minister or the aristocrats. Okay, do something wrong or something, and the Confucius kill him. Okay, and then he got fired. Okay, something like this. So that's the only thing I know. But anybody know others? That'd be great to happen. Yeah. We have George. George, please.
Yes, sorry, thank you. I just wonder. I found a lot of similarities between Confucius.
Yeah.
How do you pronounce
Confucius?
In Chinese, in Mandarin?
孔子. You got it?
Confucius.
Kong is his last name. Yeah, usually we call Zi as a Mr. So it means Mr. or Master Zi. Okay. Master Kong. Okay. Kong is his last name. Okay.
Consu. Donc, sorry. Find a lot of similarities between his work, ideas, and the works of Saint-Simon, the French priest, philosopher, and his ideas of reformation of the religion and society. Also fighting against the individualism, spiritual unity, yes, of course, but Confucius also had it originally, and also this kind of idea of devotion to the society rather than individual liberalist ideas. which in turn is known to have influenced Marx and some other socialist thinkers, Saint-Simon's ideas. So one can then really drive some link between the three ideas, you can say. Possibly. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Anybody have to comment on this one? It's difficult to say because anybody want to comment on George?
Yes, I'd like to say at the foundational understanding, let's not forget that Confucianism is a philosophy which accept that there is a natural order, okay, that there is a hierarchy. And precisely because that there is the recognition that there is a natural hierarchy, that Confucius wanted to create the educational program to make his disciple Junzi, meaning the ideal agent or the moral agent or the gentleman, all right? And what is completely not at all the same with Marxism is that Marxism thinks that the material conditions, okay, Marxism is a dialectical historical materialism, if I understand. So in Marxism, what is important is the material condition that will influence the mind of the people, and they think that if you improve the conditions, the people will be better, okay? And in Confucianism and in all philosophy of antiquity, West or East, on the contrary, the understanding that there is a natural order means that the mind of the people is more important, that you better put your effort to make an educational program to create people of quality because they have a broad mind, they wouldn't be kind, they wouldn't be nice, and they wouldn't help others. And that is the foundation of the society and not the material conditions, because material conditions can be destroyed by enemies, by natural disasters, and so on. But as long as you have quality people in your nation, they wouldn't be capable to rebuild your nation in case of invasions or of natural disasters. And I think that even if you can find inevitably certain rapprochement would are possible, I think that Confucianism and Marxism are fundamentally in a position because they don't put the core value at the same place. And I would even say that they put the core values at opposite sides completely.
All right, thank you. Let's stop here.